The wide receiver position in fantasy football is a complete shit show. One year I look like a genius because I tell people to draft Justin Jefferson as a rookie, because duh. And then the next year I look like a total moron because I tell those same people to draft Brandon Ayuk over Deebo Samuel, only to have Kyle Shanahan swiftly kick me in the balls for the next 5 months straight. In short, picking breakout players at the receiver position is a very feast or famine business from season to season. So because of that, I'm slightly changing my approach to my fantasy wide receiver rankings video this year. And yes, by the way, the rankings are back. If you've been a longtime subscriber, you know this by now, but once again, they are available over on the Patreon for as low as $1. I don't believe in charging a lot for fantasy rankings because, quite frankly, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to rob you. So if you want fantasy rankings, you want to give $1 to the channel, I really appreciate that. I don't do it for profit. I do it to help you guys. And if you want the next tier up on Patreon, which is only a couple bucks more than that, I just made a private Discord server for patrons as well, because I'm trying to get better at communicating with you guys. And to be perfectly honest, I get more emails and DMs than I can physically keep up with at this point. It is very hard for me to do that. So hopefully the Discord server helps me get better at communicating with you guys and answering questions and, clarifying things with the rankings and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to join the Discord, that's available for you as well. Again, no pressure. Whatever you guys want to do, it's up to you. But the rankings, as always, are $1 and they will always be $1. Now, as far as my approach for these rankings videos this year, again, this is not really a rankings video. If you want just pure rankings, you can go to the Patreon. This is going to be more examining certain teams and their receiver situations as a whole. These are teams that have a lot of different options, like the 49ers last year with Ayuk and Deebo and Kittle and all the running backs. We're going to be looking at teams that have a lot of options and should be a good offense. You're just not entirely sure which guys to prioritize. This video is about that. So with all that being said, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's get into the first big receiver decision on the docket, the Denver Broncos. There has been one constant throughout the last decade between every single offense that Russell Wilson has led, regardless of whatever coordinator or head coach is in charge of those offenses. And that's that inevitably, no matter what quote-unquote system they're trying to run, no matter what, they're always eventually going to be running the same system, which is the Russell Wilson system. I've done plenty of episodes on this exact topic in the past, but the short Cliff Notes version as it relates to fantasy football is that Russell Wilson heavily, and I mean heavily, prioritizes outside receivers. In fact, he predominantly targets receivers that line up outside 75% of the time because he really doesn't like working the middle of the field. Tom Brady, for comparison, does like working the middle of the field, but even he has targeted outside more in recent years because he got better outside receivers like, say, Mike Evans and at one point Antonio Brown, and he targets outside receivers in Tampa only 55% of the time. Keep in mind that the league average across the entire NFL in terms of what percentage of targets go to outside receivers is actually only 53%. So Tom Brady, even with his reputation for working the middle of the field and throwing to slot receivers, even he is slightly above average in terms of targeting receivers outside the hashes. But again, Wilson specifically is over 20% over the league average in terms of targeting outside receivers. He does it more than anyone else, or at least more often than anyone else. And that information, as it relates to fantasy, is incredibly valuable for those like me that target Courtland Sutton. Sutton takes the vast majority of his snaps outside in Denver. He always has, and he probably always will. And unfortunately, with Tim Patrick tearing his ACL last week, the only receiver on the roster that we really know for sure that will predominantly be lining up outside and working these outbreaking routes or one-on-ones down the boundary that Wilson famously loves, the only guy that fits that profile right now is Courtland Sutton. So if you're going to be focusing on drafting anyone in particular on this team, it needs to be him. He is by far the number one receiver, and he should be treated as such. Now, the complication here, and the reason why Denver made this list, is because we're not entirely sure how to handle the Jerry Jeudy debate and the KJ Hamler debate. And by that, I mean, we don't really know yet how Tim Patrick going down with his injury is going to impact the usage of these other Broncos receivers. All we do know for now is that whoever does end up lining up the majority of the time outside, like Tim Patrick would have, is going to be a massive benefactor, while simultaneously, whoever is going to be relegated to slot duty might actually have their targets go significantly down compared to what we expect from them. Either one of either Jeudy or Hamler could play inside, but it kind of depends on what skill set the Broncos want to prioritize outside, whether it's Hamler's raw speed or Jeudy's quickness and better release package that can separate early in routes. The coaching staff's preference for what they want in their outside receiver is going to be determining who plays out there. It's possible that they will constantly move both of them around and they'll get equal time both inside and outside, but again, we don't really know yet. All that we can count on is that traditionally, whoever is the slot receiver in a Russell Wilson-led offense will not be a featured target, so they are who you want to avoid, or at least Russell Wilson slot receivers are just not as featured as other slot receivers around the league. They still will obviously get targets on outbreaking concepts like sail, smash, Haas. They'll also probably get some targets on, just arrow routes underneath, or maybe a little bit in the screen game. But they really won't get a whole lot over the middle of the field because Russell Wilson just doesn't throw over the middle of the field. So in summary, when it comes to how you should be approaching this Broncos receiving core for your fantasy drafts, obviously Courtland Sutton being the wide receiver 16 in ADP right now, and I'm getting these ADPs from Underdog Fantasy by the way, wide receiver 16 is a good value for Sutton because he should, on paper, be a top 12 receiver, and you're going to be getting that at a slight discount. However, you're only getting Sutton at that discount right now because people are still trying to figure out where to take Jeudy. Jeudy is at wide receiver 23 right now on Underdog, at least on the day that I'm recording this, so both of them are getting drafted relatively close to each other, even though the only one that we know for sure is actually going to be playing a role that Wilson prioritizes is Sutton. Meanwhile, KJ Hamler, who also might now be a starting outside receiver for Denver, is all the way down at wide receiver 81. So to me, just on value here in terms of how I'm going after this receiving core and trying to get bang for my buck, I'm better off zeroing in on the more sure thing in Courtland Sutton. And then if I want to get a value play later just to get another share in this offense, I'm not even going to bother doing a shotgun approach with Jeudy, and I'm just going to skip straight to Hamler in one of the last rounds because he very easily could get a respectable amount of production in this offense for basically dirt cheap prices. So that is how I am value hunting in what should be one of the most explosive offenses in the league. And there's a similar question that we're trying to answer down in LA right now with the Rams, who also have a whole bunch of great receivers on the roster that we're not entirely sure how to properly value. Looking at the Rams offense last year, they spent the most time in 11 personnel in the entire league, meaning one back, one tight end, 3 wide receivers, and they also happen to throw in low red zone situations, meaning anywhere within 10 yards of the goal line, more than any other team as well. So if you're looking at the Rams receiving core and you aren't sure if there's going to be enough opportunities to feed both Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, plus Van Jefferson as well whenever he comes back healthy, well, think again. In my opinion, all of them could be incredibly productive and also pretty decent values at their current ADP. Right now on Underdog, Kupp is going on average as the first receiver off the board, so unless you have a top 5 pick, there's pretty much no way in hell that you're ever going to get him. However, Allen Robinson, who's just as talented as Kupp, if not even more talented, and who's also never actually had a good quarterback situation in his entire life, he's going all the way down at wide receiver 20, which is roughly in the 6th round. And full disclosure, that's also where I have Robinson ranked right now in my own rankings, but that's also the absolute floor where I will rank him. And in all likelihood, as I'm releasing more versions of the rankings week by week, he's probably going to move up from there. Considering that the Rams call a lot of passes out of 11 personnel down in low red zone situations, 39 of them inside the 10-yard line last year to be exact, and the fact that Robinson is absolutely the best post-up player on the team to take advantage of those red zone targets, I think that there's a very good shot that he leads the Rams in receiving touchdowns. He should get just as many opportunities as Kupp in those goal-to-go situations, if not even more than Kupp, and historically, looking at the last 4 or 5 years or so, he has been one of the most efficient receivers in the NFL with those types of opportunities. Not to mention the fact that he should be ultra productive as the ISO receiver on the backside of all the 3x1 concepts that the Rams really lean into, meaning that he's going to get a ton of one-on-one opportunities down the boundary, and he should get all of that same production on, say, backside dig routes, comebacks, shallow crosses, all the same stuff that Odell did in this offense when he played the same role for them last year. I think that Robinson is also going to do. So, in summary, for me, the best way to approach this Rams receiving core situation for your fantasy team is that if you're picking in the top half of the first round and there's no running backs available that you really like at that value, or rather that you trust at that value, and you just absolutely want to play it safe and make sure that you get somebody who's going to produce, yeah, you could just take Cooper Kupp. You can't really go wrong with him there. However, if you do go running back early, and I mean like back-to-back round 1 and round 2 running backs like I tend to do quite frequently, Allen Robinson and Van Jefferson at their current ADPs are gonna be your ace in the hole this year. As I mentioned, you can get Robinson in about the 6th round in most drafts right now, and Jefferson himself is going as like wide receiver 73, so he's super late too. Which means, theoretically, you could easily double up with Courtland Sutton in round 4, get Robinson in round 6, and then you're going to have 2 receivers with top 12 to 15 potential here, while also still getting your pick of the running backs in the first 2 rounds. And, by the way, maybe even having Jefferson as a late round flyer with a ton of upside as well. I open a lot of my drafts with that exact strategy of going in on running back early and then trying to come back for a slew of receivers, usually at least 2 of the 3 of Sutton, Robinson, and Brandon Ayuk, and I tend to really like the teams that I end up with when I do that. The receivers at the top of the rankings this year are great, and they're all worth their price. Kupp is one of them himself. But just remember as you're doing all of your drafts that the position itself as a whole is deep enough that you don't have to go receiver in the first or second round if you don't really want to. As with every other year, there is value everywhere. Now, to cap this thing off, let's talk about a receiving situation that is both simultaneously murky for those of you that maybe don't follow this year's rookie receiving class, and also somewhat predictable for those of you that do, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. Looking at the Cowboys receiving core from the top down, CeeDee Lamb is obviously the number 1 there. He's going to go in the second round in virtually every single format, as he should. He is a total stud. But with Michael Gallup still trying to recover from his devastating knee injury last year, and James Washington unfortunately just going down with a foot injury that's going to cost him likely about 3 months or so, at least in the first half of this season, an opportunity has presented itself for Jalen Tolbert to become a massive part of this passing game. Tolbert is, for all intents and purposes, the uncontested number 2 receiver right now, only behind CD himself. And when the Cowboys are in 12 personnel, meaning 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, and 1 running back on the field, and I expect that they're going to be basing out of that a lot to start this year, the only 2 receivers on the field are going to be Lamb and Tolbert. So, naturally, the question on everyone's mind right now is Jalen Tolbert worth the 10th round ADP that he's going at right now? Is this all just a massive trap? Or is he a good enough prospect to be counted on as a reliable number 2 receiver from day 1? And honestly, in my opinion, yes, he is that good. Going back to my film study from last spring before the draft when I was studying Tolbert coming out, he has a remarkably similar skill set to Michael Gallup, and he's likely going to play the exact same role that Gallup has played in this offense in the past, and even to a degree that Amari Cooper has played, meaning that he is going to be the boundary threat at X receiver, he's going to be on the line of scrimmage, he's going to be a static weapon, and he will mainly have one job and one job only, and that's beat press coverage, win his one-on-ones, and dominate in contested catch situations. It is true that CD could also play the X receiver spot. I mean, he can kind of do whatever he wants, he's CeeDee Lamb. But at least in my opinion, I think the Cowboys are going to focus on Lamb as the Z receiver, and when they go into 11 looks, I think that he's going to be the main slot receiver, and they're going to do that so that they can move him around as kind of a chess piece that can go anywhere. I think the fact that he's also going to be off the line of scrimmage means that they can get into these wing slot looks from 12 personnel that they love so much. They can also bump corners off of him and force them to never get their hands on him at the line by abusing short motion at the snap. And they can also give him carries on sweeps as that Z receiver as well. So I really do think that the versatility that comes from that role is going to be prioritized, and he's the best one on the roster to do it. So for me, again, that means that Tolbert is probably going to be X and CD is probably going to be Z. In terms of what this means for Tolbert and the number of opportunities he's actually going to get, I do think that he will get a ton of chances to win on these contested balls deep down the boundary, just like Gallup and to a degree Amari have been in the past. And when it comes to fantasy football, kind of the main thing that you can really hope for is target share, and he will have that. Even when Gallup and Washington come back, I don't really think he's going to lose his job because he was a dominant contested catch receiver in college, and I don't really think that's going away. Tolbert is a fantastic talent in his own right. They used a third-round pick on him for a reason, and since he's going as wide receiver 57 right now, and Gallup is going basically right next to him at wide receiver 62, honestly, if you made me choose between them, I would go with Tolbert. He does all of the same things that Gallup does, but he's actually healthy right now and Gallup is not, and he might not even be ready to play for quite a while. Even Gallup himself has said that it's really unrealistic that he's going to be ready by week 1. So for me, when it comes down to how I'm approaching this receiving core as a whole, I'm all in on CeeDee Lamb, obviously, because he's really damn good. And I think at a second round value, if there's no running backs on the board that you like, you can feel pretty safe by taking CD there. But I'm also all in on Jalen Tolbert, not just at his 10th round ADP, but even potentially in the 9th round too. If there's, nothing left on the board that I'm really interested in, I already have a tight end, I already have a quarterback, maybe there's no running backs that I like. If I just need to feel good about a 9th round pick and there's nothing left that I'm really enthusiastic about, I would be okay with Jalen Tolbert that early. It's not that I don't love Michael Gallup as a player, I do, but I have zero reason to touch him at his current ADP when Tolbert is literally sitting there right next to him in drafts, and he plays the same role, and he's actually going to be on the field. So in short, I love the player. Gallup is amazing when he's healthy, but I hate the ADP right now. If you want to sleep better at night, just take Tolbert instead. Now, if you want to be in more than just a fantasy league with your friends, or maybe you want to put some of this newfound information to use in ways that could win you a lot of money, $2 million to be specific, out of $10 million total dollars in cash prizes, our friends over at Underdog Fantasy are once again putting on Best Ball Mania, which is the biggest best ball tournament in the entire world. Again, $10 million in prizes, $2 million to first, $1 million to second, and so on and so on. Like I said, it is best ball format, so you don't need to worry about setting lineups every week or getting lucky with injuries and game script. You just draft the best possible roster you can draft at the start of the season, and then whatever your best possible score is from week to week, that is the score you're going to get. So if you draft well and you're hitting on sleepers, and more importantly, if you're drafting the right receivers in these crowded situations, that can actually end up making you a hell of a lot of money. So in the end, it's not just about drafting good receivers on good teams, it's about drafting the right good receivers on the right good teams. If you want to try out Best Ball for yourself, right now at the link in the description below using promo code Brett, your first deposit on Underdog Fantasy will be matched up to $100, which if my math serves me correctly, will pay for 4 free entries into that Best Ball Mania contest with that ridiculously high prize pool. Or you can use it on anything else on the website, whether it's pick'ems during the week or any other sport, because they do a whole bunch of different sports, even esports. There's a whole lot going on Underdog. So if any of that sounds remotely interesting to you, again, a deposit match up to $100 is waiting for you at that link in the description below using promo code Brett. Thank you once again to Underdog for sponsoring this week's show. I have another similar episode coming out fairly soon on the running back position, because obviously running back is also a complete shit show this year, and there's a whole bunch of committees that we need to look through. So if you like this, you might like that as well. Come back fairly soon whenever that is out, which I think is next week. So until then, later.